distinguished guests, colleagues, and friends, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the School of Physics and Astronomy's presentation of the 2002 Robert Street Doctoral Prize in Physics. It's also great to be able to welcome all of you in person, and some of you by Zoom, particularly so many of our current PhD students that have come together for this. Before we begin the ceremony, I'd like to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nation, on whose land we are gathered today, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, the prize is named in honor of Professor Robert Street, AO, who passed away on the 4th of July, 2013. Last year, we marked the 10th anniversary of the award of this prize since its inception in 2012. I'm also very pleased to welcome Professor Robert Street's daughter, Professor Allison Street, AO, and her partner, John Barkla. In a little while, I'll ask Allison to make the presentation of the award to the 2022 recipient, Dr. Isobel Romero-Shaw. I would also like to warmly welcome Isobel to the presentation. There she is, joining us from Zoom from her current position at Cambridge University. And we're also recording, after much technical difficulties, we're actually recording today's presentation so that Allison and the Street family have a record of today's proceedings. Now, the Robert Street Doctoral Prize in Physics is, of course, made possible through a generous bequest to the school by the late Professor Robert Street, AO, and his late wife, Joan. From the outset, I'd like to thank the Street family for their incredible generosity, keeping this award going. The occasion will proceed as follows. First, I want to provide some background information about Professor Robert Street. I will then read out the nomination for Isobel and ask Professor Allison Street to present the award. And Isobel will then share with us some of her life as a PhD student at Monash via a short presentation. And this will be followed by refreshments. Professor Robert Street, BSc, MSc, PhD, DSc, honorary DSc, both at Sheffield and University of Western Australia, FAA, FAIP, and AO, Officer of the Order of Australia, was born on the 16th of December, 1920 in Wakefield in Yorkshire, United Kingdom. In 1941, he received a BSc from the University of London, actually undertaking the research of the degree in Bristol due to the bombing of London. He began his career during World War II working at the Air Defense Research and Development Establishment, conducting work on the absolute measurement of power. In 1944 and 1948, respectively, he received his master's degree in the relatively new area of wave mechanics and a PhD on the absolute measurement of power. At the end of the war, Robert Street was appointed as an assistant lecturer in physics at University of Nottingham. And in 1954, he became a senior lecturer at Sheffield. And in 1960, Robert Street and his family moved to Australia to become the foundation professor of physics at Monash University. In 1966, he earned a Doctor of Science from the University of London. And in 1973, he was elected to the Australian Academy of Science. And in 1974, he was appointed as the director of the Research School of Physical Sciences at Australian National University. From 1978 until his retirement in 1986, Professor Street was Vice Chancellor of the University of Western Australia. And during his retirement, he supervised 17 PhD students and published 125 refereed high-impact publications, including in the journal Nature, in research encompassing a wide range of areas with multiple papers attracting over 100 to 200 citations. And this is to say nothing of his other outputs. This is quite impressive. In fact, it sort of makes me look forward to retirement. Professor Street has received numerous awards, including honorary doctorates and fellowships in the Australian Academy of Science and the Australian Institute of Physics. He was made an Officer of the Order of Australia in 1985 in recognition of his enormous contributions to Australian education and research. In 2011, the school was fortunate to have Professor Robert Street join us for the 50th anniversary of teaching and research in physics at Monash. And Michael Morgan and others took him on a tour of the Australian synchrotron and said it was remarkable to observe how many interesting and probing questions he asked of the young scientist who showed him the beam lines. It was clear how much he relished being in an experimental facility and interacting with the next, or perhaps the next to next generation of scientists. This very short overview of the career of Professor Robert Street, who is known affectionately to his staff and students simply as Bob, does not do justice to a remarkable man and a stellar career. He was an inspiration to the School of Physics in 1960s and 70s, and I hope this award named in his honor will be an inspiration to future generations of physicists at Monash. And for those of you interested, there's actually a more extensive biography of Professor Robert Street. It can be found in the 2016 edition, which is more specifically volume 27, number 2, of the online booklet, Historical Records of Australian Science, published by the CSIRO. It is now my great pleasure to introduce Robert Street's daughter, Professor Alison Street, who will be presenting the award. Professor Alison Street was head of hemostasis and thrombosis at the Alfred Hospital and Vice President Medical of the World Federation of Hemophilia. She has been actively involved in hemophilia on the international scale, being made also an Officer of the Order of Australia in 2005 for services to medicine. Alison has been a chief examiner for the College of Pathologists and was actively involved in the College of Physicians. I will shortly ask Professor Alison Street to make the award of the 2022 Robert Street Doctoral Prize to our awardee, Dr. Isobel Romero-Shaw. But before asking Professor Street to make the award, let me first say a few words about Isobel's research. At Monash, Isobel studied gravitational wave signals from colliding pairs of stellar remnants. Her PhD focused on looking for clues as to how these binaries formed. During her PhD, Isobel was awarded 2 prizes for posters about her research, 1 prize for best student talk at a conference, and 1 prize for outreach. She was also selected from a large pool of competitive applicants for a place on Homeward Bound, which is a transformational leadership initiative for women in STEM. And as part of this initiative, Isobel will get to spend 3 weeks in Antarctica in November this year, after several years of delay due to COVID, which sounds like a lot of fun. Isobel published 6 first author papers as part of her PhD thesis. One of these papers was awarded the Nolan Merrill Prize for student contribution to published research output. She was awarded the Herschel Smith Fellowship of the University of Cambridge, where she now works. At Cambridge, Isobel is continuing her quest to reveal the formation mechanisms of gravitational wave progenitors and is investigating new tools and techniques to expedite this process. It is therefore my great pleasure to now ask Alison to award the 2022 Robert Street Doctoral Prize in Physics to Dr. Isobel Romero-Shaw.
Isobel, your career so far sounds extremely stellar, and great things await you even further. So many, many congratulations on all your achievements so far. If you have a chance when you're in Antarctica to go to the Falkland Islands, go, because they are the most extraordinary ecosystems, and you're already near there. And have a wonderful time in Antarctica. It's one of the best places on Earth. I'd like to thank Chris. I'd like to thank everyone else in the department. Thank you very much. We had a wonderful lunch where it was explained in lay terms for John and myself what you've actually done, Isobel, and it was very exciting indeed. I'm looking forward to hearing further details from you. I'd like to acknowledge that today we were at the funeral streaming of Bill Rackinger. Bill was my father's first appointee to Monash in the end of 1960, I think it was, wasn't it, Michael? And I've just been looking at that photo of everyone who was in that Department of Physics back in 1961 when it was really started off. And I think Bill would have been the last one there. So I'm very grateful to have heard about Bill's life further today and the extraordinary educational achievements, particularly in his work after he retired in Indonesia and other parts of the Pacific. So Isobel, I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. We're delighted to be part of the continuing sponsorship. We've met some wonderful people. You're getting younger all the time, just like policemen. Maybe that just reflects that we're not. But it's one of the highlights of our year, and we're always very pleased to come and meet the incredibly dynamic people that work here. So congratulations to all of you, and best of luck. And thank you again, Isobel. Very best wishes.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much, Alison.
All right, so before we conclude and move on to refreshments, let's actually hear a few words from Isobel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this ceremony, and thank you very much to Alison and to the Street family for giving me this award, which I am really grateful for. I just wanted to, just go over a little bit about my time at Monash, which was a very lovely time. So this first slide is a picture from Albert Park Lake, which obviously isn't at Monash, but I hope the relevance of the reflections here are not lost on anyone. So I went looking for some pictures of Monash campus, and I realized that I didn't actually have very many. And I think that's probably because I spent about 2/3 of my PhD working from home due to the pandemic. But as it happened, somebody did ask me to take some videos of Monash campus just before I left for kind of a research outreach thing. So I actually do have several videos relevant to my time at Monash. So this first one is just kind of a view of all the different buildings that I would see on my way into the department from the bike arrival station each morning. This is a video of the office that I worked in. I eventually graduated to this desk right next to the window, which was reserved for the most senior PhD students. So I was very happy to move to this desk in the end. This is a view from that window on a nicer day. These lovely trees, they just were always looking beautiful outside the window. And this final video is just a few of us having lunch on the day that I decided to make this video, which was a very lovely time. One of the things that I really appreciated at Monash was that people were often very willing to come out and have lunch on a sunny day, or even a less sunny day as well. But as I mentioned, a lot of my PhD was spent working from home, largely helped by lots of different hobbies that I would do in the spare time around working from home. One of these hobbies was doing a lot of clay pottery making. So my husband and I ordered 5 kilograms of clay, and we made a lot of bowls and candle holders and cups and various things. And almost all of these actually made it back to the UK unscathed. Only one of the bowls smashed. Also, with that 5 kilograms of clay came a surprise gift of 2 liters of wine. This 2 liters of wine is called Vino Quarantino, which is a very fun name, but actually the wine itself was not that great. But there were 2 liters of it, so we ended up using a lot of it for cooking. Another thing that I ended up doing in lockdown, like everyone else, was getting really into sourdough baking. So here are just some pictures of various successful and less successful attempts at baking or cooking things with sourdough. And finally, this was our working from home setup. As you can see, there are 5 different monitors perched precariously on this glass table. This is my husband here wearing a classic working from home outfit of a dressing gown and slippers and these quite intense looking headphones. And I would be squeezed into this corner over here. So this was where the majority of my PhD work was actually done, in this corner over here. So just to say a few words about what my PhD research was actually about, I won't go into this in too much detail, but essentially we have detected a number of colliding stellar remnants through gravitational waves. These pairs of remnants meet each other at some location in space, lose energy from their orbit through gravitational radiation, and eventually collide. And we detect this process through their emitted gravitational waves, which we detect on Earth. But the environment in which these binaries form is not yet known. And one of the ways that we can try to distinguish which environment they might be forming in is by looking for clues to the shape of the paths that they were taking around each other before these objects merged together. So my PhD research was essentially focused on studying the data that we collect from these gravitational wave signals, and then trying to construct evidence for the shapes of these orbits. and in doing so, infer something about the formation environments of these binaries. And one of the key achievements that I made during my PhD was to spot the first evidence for a binary that looked more like this kind of squished ellipse than this circular formation here. Obviously, there was slightly more to it than that. It did take 3 years. So on this slide, I just have some pictures of some whiteboard scribblings from the Monash offices, which at one point meant a lot to me, and I'm not sure I could actually decipher exactly what's going on in either of these photos right now. Also some pictures of me giving various presentations. I did manage to give a few presentations in person during my PhD, although a lot of them were on Zoom. And this is a screenshot of the papers that went into my PhD thesis. So 6 of these were examined as part of my thesis, and one of them wasn't, because this one here was kind of a big collaboration between a very large number of authors. So I didn't feel I could take credit for the majority of that work. So as many of you in this meeting will know, Paul and Eric are the absolute dream team of supervisors. They have both very different supervisory styles, but they work incredibly well together. And I'm just so grateful for everything that Paul and Eric did for me. So thank you very much to both of you. You were just brilliant. And everyone I've spoken to who's supervised by either one of you or both of you says the same things. So yeah, you're both great. The photos that I have put on this slide are, so the middle one is from the day that I submitted my PhD thesis. We're all wearing masks, as you can see, due to the pandemic. And the other photos just kind of represent the various supportive things that Paul and Eric would do outside of supporting my research. So Paul learned that I really love snails. I keep gravitational land snails, giant African land snails as pets, but you're not allowed to have giant African land snails in Australia because they are pests. So Paul's kids collected some garden snails from their garden, and Paul dropped these off at my flat. And then I looked after them until they got too big, and I then let them go into the wild. And Eric also would be very supportive to PhD students, would be regularly taking cuttings of his plants and giving these to PhD students to keep at home. So this is one of the plants that Eric got for me as well. Also, while I was at Monash, had lots of chance to make some great friends and have some fun with various different colleagues. So this is just lots of pictures of various things that we would do together. So we would go to bars and do pub quizzes. We would go on road trips. We would go camping. Actually, my husband and I ended up being the witnesses for Vishnu and his wife when they got married. And then just before I actually left Australia, there were a whole bunch of new PhD students who joined and filled up the PhD office, and these guys were all really great as well. And I'm kind of sad that I didn't get to spend more time with you all. This picture here is from a camping trip that we went on with a load of us PhD students at the time. This was a hike that Moritz organized. And Moritz said, oh, it's just a moderately difficult hike. If you've been hiking before, you'll probably be able to do this hike. And as you can see here, we ended up having to essentially scale a vertical rock face, which I think is kind of a metaphor for the PhD process in general. It was a bit harder than we envisioned, but we helped each other through it and we got there in the end. Okay, so now I am a research fellow in Cambridge. Cambridge is a very lovely place. You're all welcome to visit anytime you like. There are lots of cows in Cambridge. There are lots of really lovely open green spaces. And in a lot of these open green spaces, if you have a cow, you're allowed to just take your cow and put it in this green space. So there's lots of cows that you can encounter. There's also lots of cycling and lots of pushing people around on these flat boats in the river, which is known as punting. So this is just some pictures of various times that we've had recently in the lovely sunny weather that's now coming as it enters into summer here. Also, being in Europe and it not being the pandemic anymore, I've been able to travel quite a lot in the last 12 months of my fellowship. So I've been to lots of different places, lots of different cities in Europe and also in the US. And I've been able to come back to Melbourne as well as part of my research during this fellowship. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do all of these things. Okay, so finally, just wanted to say a little bit about what my plans are next. Hopefully lots more gravitational wave science. O4 started yesterday, I think, so lots more signals to be detected and to analyze and to figure things out from, which is very exciting. Hopefully lots more travel. As was mentioned, I am going to Antarctica in November, and then also I have plans to go to Madrid, Milan, Corfu, and Cardiff within the next few months. In terms of my next position, I am not fully decided on what I would like to apply for next. I have only been in this position for a year so far, and it is a really great position. So I'm very grateful for it, and I'm not actively looking to move on from this right now. But I am starting to think about what I might like to do after this fellowship. So that's kind of on my mind at the moment. And yeah, thank you very much again for being here and for this award.